We are live.
Hi everyone. Uh, Today is my fourth virtual copy session. So very happy to be online again to meet everyone. As I've mentioned before, because of the circuit breaker, some things have to be adapted, and so I've also been involving my ways to see how I can better engage my residents and friends online. So we are still experimenting with our methods, and so your feedback will be really great for us at this point. Today, I have arranged for something quite special and quite different. So today we are going to talk about fake news in the time of public health crisis, and I won't be discussing this alone. In fact, today I'm very pleased and very honored to have with me some very special guests. Some of you may find them really familiar. So I have Nicholas Fang, former NMP, but also the managing director of Blackbox Research. So he has been very active in researching into fake news and debunking them in the media. Uh, Nicholas, later I will get you to wave to the audience. And then also joining us is, of course, our Speaker of Parliament, the leader of the Twitter Parliament, Mr. Chuan-Jin. And today he is in a very special get-up. I think he's really going to surprise us all in how he is going to appear on screen today. So he's right on the front line today, I would say. And then, of course, I am also very pleased to have with us a doctor who's also a volunteer with Macpherson, and he's Dr. Tay Wu Chao. But I know him as Wu Chao, and I'm also happy to have him with us because he will be able to share with us some of the fake news that are medical related or frontline related, and perhaps through his sharing, we can have a sense of what's really going on the front line and how fake news have an impact on them. So today we are talking about fake news in a time of public health crisis. Just on Monday, when we had our parliament, I posed a parliamentary question on fake news, and Minister Iswaran replied that since late January, there has been a total of 40 fake news that have been clarified and debunked by the government. And the government continues to take a very serious view and stance towards this because of how it might foment anxieties and perhaps, in my opinion, public disorder. I wonder, for these people who create fake news, are they doing this out of mischief, or is it because they are just social anarchists at heart? I'm not sure. But in any case, the consequences of some of these fake news can be dire. And I hope that through today's session, we can, explore this topic a little bit more and hear from people who are really facing some of these fake news to share their experiences and observations with us. So without further ado, please let me pass the time over to Nick. Nick, can I get you to share with us, because you have been very actively researching into some of the fake news and debunking them, perhaps you can share with us your observations and what you think the impact of fake news can be on us overall. Nick, thank you. Over to you.
Sure thing. Thanks very much for having me here, and hi to everyone. Of course, speaker, the most dramatic of all of us.
But sorry, the duty not over yet, so I feel like.
I think we're going to have a very interesting conversation today. Just to start with the comment that Minister Iswaran made in Parliament about the government checking 40 pieces of whether it's misinformation, disinformation, or malinformation, the different types of fake news that are out there. My organization, Blackbox Research, actually, we put out almost 60 pieces of COVID-related fact checks since the so-called start of the greater public awareness and attention on the pandemic and the outbreak in Singapore in January. So there's really quite a lot of things that are floating around out there. Just for the sake of argument and for the sake of alignment, there are three different types of so-called fake news that we talk about. Obviously, misinformation is fake news or false information that's being circulated without a lot of malice or without a lot of agenda. Under that kind of category, you would have, the family chat groups where people are sharing information about potential cures, what you can do to prevent COVID and things like that. You have disinformation, which is the one that is more of greater concern, where fake news is being spread with a specific agenda, with the aim of actually achieving some kind of objective in terms of people's behavior. And it's usually executed by people who have a specific agenda or target that they want to achieve. And then malinformation is where you have fake news and a bit of truth being combined together. And that is usually the hardest type for people to discern. And the reason why some of this is being done sometimes is for mischief. As Pei said, we don't really know exactly why. Sometimes it's because it's a bad actor. It could be from inside or outside Singapore who are trying to achieve something in society. And sometimes it's well-intentioned family members, for example, sharing stuff that is not true because they are concerned or because they don't know any better. So over the course of all the fact checks that we've done, the 60 over pieces, we've seen all different types of these kind of fake news that's happened in Singapore in the past few months. In the beginning, we've seen the development of the fake news follow basically the trends and happenings within the broader society. In the beginning, there was a lot of concern over the first case. Was there actually a first case? Where did it happen? Was it in this shopping mall? Was it in that shopping mall? Even before we had our first confirmed case. As the situation developed, the conversation shifted a bit more to what can you do to prevent COVID? Is there a cure? Is there a miracle cure? I think Dr. Tay can share a little bit more about how this is, of course, a concern for the medical profession. You know, people are saying if you hang an onion by your window, it will stop the coronavirus from coming into your house. How do you know? After a while, the onion will turn black color, so you can see all the virus is actually inside the onion.
You see, now all the onions will be sold out in NTUC.
Yeah, exactly. I think if you leave an onion anywhere, eventually it will turn black color. That's how it works. And then we have, of course, then concerns shifting to can your pets spread coronavirus? And we started to have, then we started to see some maybe a little bit more jokey kind of posts. There was an NTUC post, alleged post to say that bat meat was being sold in NTUC. There was a manipulated image that said CNA had tweeted that from a particular day, all schools were going to be put on suspension, and this was months before the circuit breaker came into place. And then we started to see things that became a bit more concerning. Dr. Tay, of course, I think you can talk a bit more, but people were starting to speculate about whether you can still do CPR in a time of COVID. Should you not do CPR because we run the risk of contracting COVID? Of course, this has very severe implications for public health and safety. If you see somebody who requires CPR, we started to see, of course, rumors about lockdowns, rumors about the lack of supplies in Singapore. And then when we entered circuit breaker, we started to see a lot of rumors, of course, about people getting fined for sitting in a seat that's marked with an X by a social distancing ambassador. Of course, social distancing ambassadors who had to come out to clarify that that's not necessarily their role. And then now with the current situations in the dormitories, in the past couple of days, in the past 2 weeks, we see a lot more potential fake news. I think Minister Shanmugam came out to address this as well, around situations in dorms. So we saw one video of a fight that had broken out in what looked like a dormitory. This later proven to be originating from somewhere in the Middle East, probably Dubai. And then the biggest worry that we saw was a video of a person who had hanged himself, and it was being shared on WhatsApp, and people were saying that, oh, this happened in a Tuas dormitory. This guy hanged himself because of worries of no money and no jobs. And I think those were the situations that we are most concerned with right now because of the situation with the migrant workers who are being isolated and quarantined. If this kind of fake news starts to circulate among their community, it can cause a lot of stress and distress among them as well. So that's what we'll be looking at. So it's been interesting to see how the fake news has evolved in tandem with the situation on the ground. And for us, the biggest concern is that because the people who share fake news are obviously quite in tune with what people are talking and thinking about, they can make fake news very, very relevant to people, very, very interesting. And of course, that makes it much more prone to being shared and spread across all the different platforms, WhatsApp, Telegram, shared on Facebook, and being circulated in different types of social media as well. So we remain very concerned, and we are mindful that we cannot just concentrate on one type of fake news. We have to observe how things evolve, and then we are able to detect the new types of fake news that seem to be coming up in tandem with those developments as well. So I'll stop there, and then maybe we can chat a bit more later.
Thank you, Nicholas. So I think it's really interesting to see how the fake news has evolved, the content, the method that evolved along with this actual situation, sounds to me that this can be quite deliberate by some of the actors as well. But I think more importantly is that during a public healthcare crisis, it can be very damaging to the good for everyone with fake news going around. It could even perhaps delay treatment. So I think here with us today we have Dr. Tay. He is from the front line and he's also a volunteer of McPherson. I thought we'll have him share some of the fake news, medical related fake news related to COVID-19, of course. Have him share with us some of the top 3 to 5 fake news that he has seen and how has it affected, say, frontline workers or just the general public's well-being. Dr. Tay, Yu Chao, can you please share some with us?
Thank you, Ms. Tin, and thank you very much for having me today. And it's really an honor to be here to be sharing with you some of the things that I heard. And sometimes even as a medical doctor myself, working in NCID, sometimes we hear on some of this news and we go, where did this come from and who started it? And I think that sometimes it's very, so I think what Nicholas mentioned, there are 3 main kinds of fake news. That probably a lot of the news are actually misinformation, which means out of goodwill, out of someone's concern, someone decided to start something about garlic, onion, pepper. I think in the US, peppers are also being sold out. And from the medical community, these are things that are low harm. These are things probably, barring you eating a whole bucket worth of garlics, but probably eating more garlic, a little bit more garlic in your life, a bit more peppers, are probably going to cause no harm. And I think in a time of crisis, people are always searching for answers, and people want to empower themselves. They don't want to feel so helpless against this virus. So it's understandable that people.
Outbreak,
Yes, that's true too. Yeah. So I understand the kind of mentality. And so from the medical perspective, when the things are actually no harm or close to no harm, we let it be. We don't try to actively intervene. But there are another kind of people that will actually spread news, not sure what's the agenda behind, but rather it's just because of something they want to do. One of the most ridiculous things I've heard is smokers cannot get COVID. It's okay because when we smoke, there's hot air in the breath, and therefore it's okay to smoke. We don't need to wear a mask. And then
Actually, that reminds me of a joke. I remember when I was still a student and SARS broke out, and people were actually downing alcohol because alcohol is supposed to kill virus, and so they say that if they drink alcohol, it would just kill off all the virus inside the digestive tract. So actually, this time I don't really hear that as much, but sounds quite similar to what.
No, but I think alcohol and bleach. Even famous politicians even mentioned bleach as well. So I can see that trend of logic.
Don't drink bleach. Please don't drink bleach.
Please don't drink bleach ever. But yeah, so, and I think what's hilarious was, so, sometimes when I walk past the smoking, when I drive past the smoking corner, and then you see a whole bunch of smokers, even today in circuit breaker, crowded in the small little yellow box and all masked down and actively smoking. And actually, I think that's even worse because when you smoke, when you're actively breathing out, there's actually a lot of aerosolization of your breath. And this is exactly the way the virus particles tend to spread. So I think number one thing that triggers me the most is probably smokers are not immune from COVID, and please do wear a mask. And if the smoking corner is already very crowded, try not to go in there to join in the party of aerosolized breath particles. I think that's number one. And the other thing that about mask wearing that is mildly concerning is that some people believe that I think for the rest of Singapore, they finally understand that wearing a mask the whole day is actually not a very comfortable thing, and you see the healthcare workers doing it daily, and so people start taking shortcuts. So yeah, people saying that the nose is very uncomfortable, let's just not cover the nose, cover the mouth only, and they think that's okay. And with that, they think that they are invincible, and they start going around and I think that kind of mindset is what is dangerous. When you believe that you are immune to something, or you think that you're invulnerable to something, and you start going around the community, and that's where you can actually start, and that's where you can, which is actually linked to the third and quite well known by now, that asymptomatic patients, if you don't have fever, if you don't have any symptoms, you cannot spread. You don't have the virus, and you cannot spread the virus. So this is something that was only quite recently known. To be honest, in the early part of the disease, everything about this virus was quite unknown. We assumed it to be like SARS, where patients started becoming infectious after they are symptomatic. But as we knew more and more, I think there's a Hong Kong group which actually looked at this and actually noticed that the way COVID spread. It's more like influenza, where you catch a virus, you're infectious for a few days before you turn symptomatic, which means that there is a big proportion of the population out there who have no symptoms, and you can actually be contagious as well. And this is really the group that is very, very scary. And this points on to the other fake news that we hear is that, so if a person can be running on the street, he can do exercise, can do all these things, they're definitely safe and healthy and do not have COVID, and that's fine. And I think so. There are a lot of things as a poor, unknown, helpless person trying to assure themselves, and you try to tell yourself this cannot be, and then but invariably you get yourself exposed to the virus by thinking that you're invulnerable. I think that's probably one of the things that, from the medical point of view, when we see is that please stop doing all this, please stop doing what, because we are concerned. Just to answer some of the things that Nicholas mentioned about, I think this thing about CPR in times of COVID, and I think that is a very, very valid point, because while we want to tell people that the community prevalence or the community spread of COVID is very low, really anybody can be a carrier of COVID, which means if faced with a patient who have collapsed, if you're on the street faced with a patient who have collapsed, if you are not wearing mask, the person is not wearing mask, and you don't feel safe to do CPR, I think you are not obliged to help. Even in the hospital, that's what we do. If a patient is collapsing, but you do not have the appropriate equipment, you do not go in, you do not rush in to try to resuscitate a patient. I think number one most important thing is to protect yourself. So make sure that you are protected. If you're wearing masks, the other person is wearing, the casualty is wearing masks, the next best thing you can do, of course, mouth to mouth, we will not recommend it in this climate of COVID. But the least you can do, if you can do chest compression until SCDF arrives, I think that would be useful as well. The other thing that I wanted to reply to Nicholas about the concept of cure. So cure is a word that non-medical people tend to throw around, and we use it quite, if you have a cure for this, everything will be okay. And cure is to the doctors, if you actually speak to any doctor, no one will actually, for any condition in the world, even cancer, we won't say your cancer is cured. Things are only in remission, or things are resolved. A simple bacterial infection, which we know that antibiotics can cure, in the same bacterial infection, if you infect a patient who is vulnerable, a 90-year-old elderly patient with pre-existing lung problems, then even if you can cure the primary bacteria insult, the patient's lack of physiological reserve is not going to tide them through the thing, and a person can succumb to the virus as well. Using an example of one of the patients with COVID. So we have a patient in COVID in ICU for a long time, and the virus was actually cleared out of the body by about six to 8 weeks, but then he still continues staying in ICU for another 1 month. So you must remember that what we envision it be like is that the COVID virus had a party in the person's lungs, you invite some guests over to your house, had a party, they trashed the whole house around, made it really messy. Sure, now the virus have left, but what you're left behind is a lung in a very, very bad state, which makes you vulnerable to other kinds of infections, which can be potentially the downstream life-threatening or death, can lead to death as well. So I think don't underestimate this virus. The medical community, we are also looking at this virus. We are looking at it evolve. And one big question which no one has the answer to now is, what are the long-term sequelae of contracting this infection? Because the longest term we have, even if you're talking about patient number 1 in China, you're talking about 5 months, and that's the maximum long-term study we have for any this disease now. So downstream, 20 years later, are they going to be more prone to anything? Nobody really knows. So this is, if you think about it like that, it can be quite rather scary and it's a big unknown. So we try to tell everybody not to challenge your fate and not to tempt fate and do silly things. And last thing, I think just to say, my own personal take on this fake news and whatever Nicholas mentioned about fake news is very easy to generate. Okay, it is very fake news are very much in tandem with the times, because it's so easy to create fake news. Oh, something happened. Let's create some hypotheses. Let's do some conspiracy theory and just put it up. No need to fact check. No need to validate anything. Just put it up. It will garner a lot of interest, garner a lot of sharings, and you feel very good about yourself. And then the poor people, probably like Nicholas, who have to do fact checking, because every fake news time is probably to type the fake news is 5 minutes of effort, and to fact check to make sure everything is correct or wrong, it probably takes hours or days of work. So you can understand why a lot of times fake news are debunked only much later, because the people who are debunking these fake news are proud of their work. They want to make sure that when they debunk it, it's really wrong. But the people who create it, I mean, does it really matter? Just create it. I thought that was something very interesting about why fake news is always faster and in tandem with the times, and very, very sexy always.
Yeah, no, that's 100% true. And that's one of the reasons why for us, our turnaround time, we try to make sure that it's within at least within the same day, 24 hours, if not within a 4-hour period, because fake news goes viral. That's the aim of fake news. And we try to catch it before it can even get to that stage.
Well, I really enjoy this. Actually, Dr. Tay has always been very passionate about this because I've been following him on Instagram as well. And so he has been sometimes expressing his, I would say, frustration, if I can say that, when he come across fake news, because I can imagine the medical professionals, actually everyone on the front line, working so hard to combat this virus, this invisible enemy of mankind. And yet there are people who, I don't know, maybe nothing else to occupy them at the moment, just trying to create a lot of confusion and making work that is already tough even more challenging for those who are really doing the real work. So really kudos to all the frontliners. Please continue to focus on fighting the battle. And so I think to everyone out there, we really need to really be on the alert. Now I would like to take this opportunity to unveil our very special guest, because he is very special in a very special get-up today. Our Speaker of Parliament, the man behind the Twitter Parliament, and then of course that's none other than Mr. Chuan-Jin. Chuan-Jin, over to you. Can you show yourself?
I can't remove it at the moment.
Yeah.
But I think whatever the reasons, can you hear me?
Yeah.
So whatever the reasons people have, there will be those with best of intentions, but at the source of some of this news, obviously someone is creating it, some clearly deliberate. But I don't think it's ever going to go away because of human nature, the way things are. Some will have a political agenda, others will have different reasons for doing so. But what I do ask is that in the midst of a health and security crisis, especially now, we really do need to pay attention to this because it can cost lives. For example, when you create, as Nicholas shared earlier, when you show pictures, for example, of dorms fighting, people hanging themselves, I'll tell you, we were just here talking to the migrant workers. These are some concerns. So with the doctors here to talk to them, to assuage them. And because they are also consuming news online, if you agitate, if you create uncertainty, and that's key. When there's uncertainty, when there's stress, anxiety goes up, and you don't know what's going to happen. And that's why lives can be cost in terms of, for the individual, when you create more undue anxiety, already people are concerned for various reasons. And then you also have our Singaporeans at the front line, our police officers who are speaking to, our healthcare officers, and they have to deal with the consequences of some of these things. And some of these things also affect morale because they're out there doing their darnest best, looking after the workers, or out there looking after Singaporeans in different contexts. And yet you have constantly different, sometimes not just fake news, but half-truths or news that are pervaded in different ways, exaggerated for various reasons, whatever the reasons may be, it also affects them. And I think for doctors in the healthcare line, especially those in the front line, where you need to be up like things like this, you all know that in order to ensure that they don't get infected, it's really about discipline. It's about being careful as you take out your PPE and so on and so forth. And already there's a lot of fatigue. And if you couple that with mental stress, knowing that the public is going on about this, that, the other, it really doesn't help. So I think, apart from generating work for Nicholas and his company and others for doing the fact checking, I think all of us have a responsibility. We are all by nature capable. We like to share things. We like to be first to share. I tell you, but don't share with everybody. And then, of course, that's how it happens. And then you say the same thing to somebody else. But in a time like this, particularly, I do hope that we just be just extra diligent, because there is a very real impact. It can cost lives. It can have an impact on operational work that's being done by many of our guys at the front line. So I think we are the first line and filter. And if we are not sure, check. The government today has put up a lot of different sources to tap on, and we will inform in good time. When the news isn't out, then wait for it to come out. I know we are all very anxious to be first to know, but let's not spread it unless it's confirmed. And it really will help, I think, all the guys at the front line here.
Thank you. And that's Chuan-Jin from the front line, actually.
Okay, I'm just volunteering with the NGO group. So we are going around to do some of the needs assessment in the smaller dorms to help mom and the agencies here. And so the collaboration is important because we pick up information. Of course, some of these dorms do have infection taking place. So in these dorms, we have to break that down in PPE and but the main thing is to make sure that the well-being is looked after. What's the feedback like in terms of the living conditions, the food conditions, the healthcare conditions. And from time to time, I try to interview our doctors, our migrant workers, so that they can share their stories as well. And in many ways, this is an area where I guess not all Singaporeans are interested in, but a number are. And I just hope that you do read widely and to have a perspective about what's happening on the ground. There are problems, but we clearly need to deal with them because this outbreak is massive. It's a scale which, I think we sometimes forget. Nobody in the world can ever be prepared for something like that. But I think after the initial couple of days when we had to lock down the dorms, I think things rapidly stabilized and we continue to work at it every day.
Thank you for sharing. I hope things are okay over there where you are now.
It varies from dorm to dorm. It really varies. Some dorms really are quite well run. Some not bad, but can be improved. Those that are downright really not doing their part, we have to report to mom. Some of them, as a result of reports, have got shut down. Some step in, rectified it. But that's ongoing. So that's something that we need to do. The big ones, I think, are generally in good order. They're doing what they can, the large purpose-built dorms. So the next tier will be the factory-converted dorms, which range from, I've been to dorms that are just 3 people to those that are a couple hundred strong. But some really well managed, some not so great. That really needs to be improved. So that's where the needs assessments comes in. And really kudos to a lot of the volunteers who are stepping forward with some of the NGOs who are doing this work. Every day and especially weekends, more of us will come in and help out as well.
Great. Chuan-Jin we are not surprised that you are there on the front line, to be honest. So kudos to you. I think there are some questions that have been posted by some of our viewers. One has I don't know how to pronounce this, but has remdesivir been approved for use locally for COVID-19 patients? Yu Chao, do you want to just
I think to reply,
that?
So I think recently remdesivir has caught a lot of international attention because while it doesn't provide as a cure, but when used in early disease, it does shorten the length of the duration of the disease. And yes, to answer your question, remdesivir is being used in Singapore.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then there is this comment that says healthy, no need to wear mask. So what do you have to say about this? I think there was also another picture that I saw earlier just now, where they said that there are 3 tiers. The rates of transmission. So for someone who is ill, if you wear a mask, you actually prevent the transmission more than those who are well and wear a mask. Actually, what do you think of wearing a mask? Is it really useful? And is it a foolproof method during this pandemic? Maybe you can just share some comments on this.
So I think mask wearing in itself, there are 2 parts of this question. I think for healthcare workers, especially those that are directly handling patients with COVID, of course, you need every form of protection because these are patients with actually positive disease. So you need a high gear, you need like what Mr. Speaker was wearing. You need a full PPE for that. For on the streets and where the rate of
this is in more extreme conditions. Normal day to day, obviously, you wouldn't be wearing this.
So
right?
on a day-to-day
all
basis,
soaked with water inside. I squeeze out other fancy.
It's terribly uncomfortable.
I think doctor will know, right?
At least I wear it in the aircon room. You're out there in Singapore weather.
Yeah.
So, but mask wearing, I think
no aircon room.
there's no aircon room there. Yeah, mask wearing is, I think it is disheartening to see that comment after I just mentioned that part about asymptomatic patients. So what is important is to realize, number one, that there are two parts to mask wearing. There is a part about preventing the infection on yourself, and there's the second part of it of preventing spreading to others. So when you're wearing a mask, if let's say you are actually infected but you have no symptoms yet, the symptoms might appear 3 or 4 days time. You might have no symptoms yet, but by wearing a mask, all your respiratory droplets, be it your breath, your saliva, all those things, while they are not 100% foolproof and not some of them can escape the mask, but you actually trap a lot of them within the mask, be it surgical mask, be it a handmade mask at home. And this will greatly reduce the amount of viable virus particle that escapes your breath. And this is on the infected person's end. And on the other end, on the receiving end, if you're wearing a mask, which means that if the person generating the virus particle has already a reduction in what he generated, but by you wearing a mask, you can also help further reduce the amount of virus particles that you receive. And with that 2-layer reduction, then even let's say the amount of virus that actually managed to get into your respiratory tract will be much lower. And hopefully your body's own mechanical defenses, be it your saliva, be it your secretions, be the respiratory, the hair, the nose hair, things like that. Those can also further help to reduce the virus entry into your body cells. So every layer of barrier is important. And to answer the question to answer that question, to do it in terms of 2 ways. One, if you are kiasi, you wear a mask to protect yourself. And the other thing is to appeal to your civic morality in that please wear a mask to protect others in the off chance that you might actually have the COVID virus.
Sounds good, but it's not the only way that we can use to protect ourselves, right?
Actually, yes, actually, all these things this whole discussion is a moot point. The best way is to not be in contact with anything at all. So number one, stay at home, please. Don't anyhow go out. If you are not even anywhere near the source or the recipient of the virus, that's probably the best way of prevention. So doesn't mean that you are invulnerable when you have a mask. I think that's the most important.
And because you don't know who is the source, that's why the idea of safe distancing and minimizing contact is so critical. Because as we now have come to realize about the asymptomatic nature, which actually makes this virus a really, really tricky one to deal with, you just have to, I guess, when there's some level of community spread, the best way is just to avoid and minimize contact where possible, or keep it as fleeting as possible, keep the safe distance, and do all the necessary measures that we need to. And what we've come to realize is that mask has been useful, not to infect others, in case you are actually infected but you don't realize it.
So to recap, wearing a mask is useful, but it is not the only way that we can take to protect ourselves. In fact, if we only rely on masks, that may lull us into a sense of complacency. So it's a combination of mask and safe distancing that we need to actively comply with during this period of time if we want to keep ourselves safe as well as to protect others around us. So I'm mindful of the time. I want to also go back to this question which I actually have seen a few of the similar nature, which is people are saying that, okay, right, we can't stop really people from creating all these fake news, whether they are just mischievous or whatever it is. So how can I be the smarter person, the wiser person, to look out for the telltale signs? And some of these may take bits and pieces from real sources. It sounded credible. So how can I look out for these telltale signs? What are the steps that I can take, to protect myself against this fake news? So maybe I can let Nicholas take a stab at this.
Yeah, I just wanted to build on that question, and also, of course, something that the speaker mentioned as well, which is the severity and the fact that fake news represents a clear and present danger for us, and it's something that all of us should A, be concerned about, and B, try to proactively do something about it. So, even as we are doing things like trying to deal with the simple ways to stop the spread of COVID-19, I think the spread of fake news can be, in some cases, just as dangerous. And I think that what the work that fact checkers do, I would highlight that we are not actually trying to build some kind of super duper secret system where if you give me a question, I'll punch it into a system and then it will spit out a reply, truth or fake, that kind of thing. We're not trying to be the arbiter of truth. And I think that the danger of going down that particular route is where you outsource your sort of your ability to analyze and to discern to a third party, is that, that could become a contested space. What if one day there are a lot of different fact checkers operating with different agenda, fact checking each other, and then it ends up into a situation where people again don't know who to believe anymore. So I think building a culture of sort of information literacy within a community, building a bit more resilience and robustness when it comes to that sort of thing is critical. And how to do it, the first step, exactly as Pei Ling mentioned, is to develop some very basic skills. And the way we do fact checks, we actually publish our entire methodology in our fact checks, how we went through all the different steps. We do make a point to go to the primary source. If somebody is quoted, if an organization is mentioned or reported, we try to reach out to them and say, hey, first and foremost, is this actually true? We'll reach out to the person if we can identify, or an organization who put out the news first, and ask them, where did you get your sources from? Is this true? Did you put it out, or is it based on hearsay and things like that? If we can't get those, we go to secondary sources, where we back check with other more reputed news sources and try to find whether anybody else has reported it, in the past, which will allow us to triangulate if we cannot reach the primary source. And very simple things that people can look out for. If you look at the web address, can you tell whether the web address is a credible web address? People putting out images that look a little bit suspect. It's very easy to do a reverse image search. There are a lot of free to use tools where you copy paste an image or even a video, a screen grab from a video. They will tell you whether this has appeared before, whether it's an old video, whether it's an existing video. And pretty much when you do some of these basic steps, you'll be able to get some sensing of whether something is true or not. We are not at that very worrying phase where there are exact replications of news articles, for example. We don't have that much deep fake kind of videos where speaker, there's an avatar of speaker saying something, and then people see it and they believe it instead of
It's a matter of time.
It is a matter
In fact,
of time.
It's here now, and I wouldn't be surprised to see it soon.
And there are ways to counter that technologically as well. But I think our concern is when these tools or these levers that the fake news spreaders have are deployed in a campaign, where you will see fake articles, fake photos, fake videos. You start to see deep fake videos being circulated all around, to get people to do something at a particular time, where they don't have time to react and things like that. So we really do need to build that kind of culture of resilience and information literacy. You have bodies like the Media Literacy Council, you have the media themselves, you have third-party fact checkers all trying to, of course, the government doing their part as well. But it really needs a whole of nation approach where people have to take responsibility. You cannot always say, oh, somebody else will do it, or a fact checker will do it for me. We have to learn how to develop these tools, and it's a matter of our long-term survival and security as well.
I think that's
what it does is undermine confidence. It undermines trust. So I mean, if you say that those were good intention, I mean, be that as it may, but whether, as Pei Ling said earlier, is it anarchic in nature, where it is meant to sow discord, where it is meant to breed uncertainty, so that anything is said, nobody trusts anything anymore. And basically institutions, leaders at various levels, different organizations are undermined. And then actually begin to break down in some ways. But that's something you see happening elsewhere as well, because your own moral authority begins to be degraded. Different agencies also begins to be doubted. So after that, is what rule of law? Is it rule of our own sensibilities? Or is that, oh, nothing is ever true, let's go and find out. And of course, the salacious will always, like it or not, viral a lot more than the correction that comes out. And we have seen that to be the case. And people can then end up still having particular perception. Like the Columbine massacre, for example, is debunked very early on, but the image of the shooters, what they're decked in, that image has become very sticky in the minds of many. And unfortunately, that's the way it is. So the first shot out, for whatever reason is done, it tends to be very sticky and it's shaping perception. And you drip over time, there is a real impact now. So But as Nicholas said, I mean, I don't think this is going to go away. We try our level best, but I guess the best filter in my mind is ourselves as Singaporeans and to think about what's at stake, what's the agenda, even if this might well be true or prematurely let go, how does it help society by being releasing the news a couple of hours earlier than it ought to be? Because sometimes news information is released at an appropriate time because preparation work needs to be done rather than straight away. And of course, different people might have different views. But I guess, we will have to try what we can do at government level, at society level. But like I said, I think individuals need to remember that consequences can be very real. And I would say that in situations like now, where there are real ramifications, I just do ask that all of us play our part and hopefully just exercise our sensibility. If in doubt, I think check your official sources. And thereafter, if you still choose to want to share or say something, that's fine. But at least do that part rather than a knee-jerk reaction and just automatically sharing stuff or saying things that we may not be very clear about.
Well, thank you guys. It's really great to have you share this. I would add on to just a little bit of the conclusion. I think it is important that we, first of all, do not create fake news, no matter how appealing that may be. And secondly, if we are unsure of the source or the truth of it, do not propagate it because the consequences can be quite dire. Firstly, on a personal health basis, if it's going to, mislead people into thinking that they are safe or that there are alternative ways of curing a disease, then what may happen is that it will delay people from seeking the right treatment. And in this case, it may, delay people from getting to see a doctor, to do the necessary steps to protect themselves or others around them. And that may actually, ironically, cause a further spread. And also, some of these fake news can actually cause social disorder. I don't think we can afford a public, disorder in Singapore. But and in any case, nobody should want to desire that in the first place. So fake news should have no, in my opinion, fake news has no place in this society. But the reality is that we can't stamp it out. And so we can only try to teach ourselves the skills to become wiser to all these information. I mean, this is an age of information explosion, digitalization. The digital future is almost here, if not already here. And so we need to all be wiser and smarter. So with that, I want to thank all my special guests. Thank you for giving me face by coming on to my virtual coffee session. And thank you, Chuan-Jin, for holding your phone up there for more than 45 minutes in your full PPE.
I've been switching different positions.
Yeah, I know. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And of course, to Nicholas as well as Uchao, and also to all the viewers online. I hope you found this session informative and engaging as well. We're still evolving our methods, but your feedback will be very much appreciated. So that's all that I have. I don't know whether the guys, you have any last shout out. If not, then I will wish everyone a very pleasant weekend. Anyone, anything?
Thank you very much to speaker for suffering through out there in the heat. You can see how hot it is out there, and it must be really tough. And you mentioned
the doctors know they wear it every day, so.
But like Dr. Tay said, he wears it in aircon, not like you.
I'm sure you're also sweating. I'm sure you're also sweating like mad, right, inside the aircon room.
Yeah, and also
no, I'm pretty sure it's worse.
I hope you don't have to wear diapers inside.
Let's not go there.
Some story.
But happy Mother's Day to everybody in advance too.
Oh yes.
Yeah,
happy Mother's Day.
Okay, so thank you everyone, and I will see you again soon.
Thank you.
Bye.